There are stories we tell to survive, and others we bury to forget. But the truth, the one that aches and burns, always finds its way back. This is one of those truths. Why it was never going to work. It was never going to work. Our marriage, from the very beginning, was like a house of cards, not built on love, but on the fragile foundations of childhood wounds that never truly healed. He was the son who meant everything to his mother, and I was the daughter who was never enough for hers, but always had to obey. When two people never learn how to breathe on their own, when they spend their whole lives inhaling air pumped into them by their parents, there's no way they can learn how to breathe together. It wasn't love. It was an escape. He was running from being alone. I was running from being dependent. And even though, at first, it felt like maybe, just maybe, it could work, over time, we became mirrors of each other's oldest wounds. Everything we left unsaid, everything we never truly lived through, started leaking into our everyday lives, into the choices we never really made, into the decisions made for us, by their voices, their expectations. It was never going to work. And now I know, sometimes love just isn't enough, especially when no one ever taught you what love even is. My childhood under the wings of control. My mother said she loved me, but her love came with strings. I was a puppet in a theater where she was the director. I wasn't allowed to say no. I wasn't allowed to have secrets. I wasn't allowed to have my own opinions, and definitely not my own needs. I was a little girl who didn't know how to breathe without my mother's permission. Every decision had to go through her, my clothes, my friends, even my thoughts. Everything had to be appropriate. Translation, aligned with her vision. From the outside, the perfect mom, warm, devoted, always present. But at home, she was a tyrant disguised as a loving caretaker. Love was her weapon, manipulation, her language. Whenever I did something on my own, she'd go silent. But not just any silence. It was the kind that punished, like the cold of an empty room, where there's nowhere to hide. Over time, I realized that wasn't care. It was control, wrapped in pretty words, disguised as what's best for you. I wasn't raised to live. I was raised to obey. And for years, I thought that's what it meant to be loved. His childhood, the son who replaced the husband. His father was there, physically, present. But it was his mother who decided everything, and she didn't do it alone. Because she had a partner, her own son. From an early age, he heard what she felt, what she struggled with, what scared her, what she couldn't count on in her husband, and how badly she needed him. A little boy who should have been playing with toy cars instead became a pillar for a grown woman. He became her confidant, her emotional partner, her comfort, when the man who was supposed to be that failed. That wasn't closeness. It was a role reversal. It was a burden no child should ever carry. He never learned to say no, because it would have hurt her. He never learned to take care of himself, because he was always taking care of her. He never got to be a son, because from the beginning, he was everything but. She didn't need a child. She needed someone to stitch up her emotional wounds. And he became that, without being asked, without having a choice. And when he grew up, he searched for a woman who needed saving, because that's all he knew, because only in that kind of love did he feel needed. 2 emotional children in one marriage. We weren't partners. We were 2 emotional children, looking for shelter in each other. But each of us carried our own baggage. I came with a heart crushed by other people's expectations. He, with a soul patched together from his mother's needs. We didn't know how to love. We only knew how to adapt. Sometimes we fought. Sometimes we went silent. Sometimes we pretended everything was fine. Instead of talking, we read each other through the filter of our wounds. I was afraid he'd leave me, so I tried to be good. He was afraid he'd let me down, so he said nothing. He just disappeared. There was no us in that, only the echoes of our childhood homes, the voices of our mothers, still sitting with us at the table, telling us what to do, where to go, how much freedom we were allowed to have. And when I tried to change something, I became the difficult one. When I asked for his presence, he ran back to his mother, because that was the only place he ever felt enough. Love without boundaries. Sounds beautiful, but in reality, it's chaos, where no one knows who they truly are. We wanted to be together, but no one ever taught us how to be ourselves. And without that, a life together becomes nothing more than an extension of the same old prison. My awakening, therapy and breaking the spell. There came a moment when I could no longer pretend that everything was fine. I was tired. Tired of pretending to be the perfect daughter. Tired of being a wife who had no right to hurt. Tired of living a life that someone else had written for me. I started therapy, not to save the marriage, but to save myself. At first, I felt like a traitor, because I stopped answering every call from my mother, because I started saying no, because I dared to have my own opinion. I took a 3-month break from contact, and it was the hardest, but the most important decision of my life. It wasn't running away. It was a boundary, for the first time, drawn by me. I didn't cry when she gave me the silent treatment. I didn't cave when she tried to shame me. I didn't go back when she sent me a dramatic message asking, "And who will love you now, if not me?" I answered, "I will. Now, I will. I am no longer a child. I am a woman, and I will never again let anyone else decide who I'm supposed to be." His stagnation, still entangled in his mother's web. I started to wake up, but he was still asleep, still in the same place, still playing the same role, still orbiting the same woman who had always been his whole world. He didn't want to hurt her. He didn't want to choose. So, he didn't choose at all. Instead of standing by our family, he stood by comfort. We were in debt. We had no stable home. But he was renovating hers, a home that wasn't ours, for a woman who wasn't his wife. He put his business into debt, worked nights to help her, even though he knew I didn't agree, even though he'd promised never again would he put her needs above ours. And me? I had nowhere to be heard, nowhere to be seen, nowhere to be his partner. With his mother, he built a world where he was the hero, and I was the problem. He didn't want to disappoint her. So he disappointed me. Once, twice, hundreds of times, until I stopped waiting for anything to change. Because you can't build a relationship with someone who's never cut the cord, with someone who's still someone's child, instead of being your husband. When his mother becomes the other woman. I don't want to say this, but I have to. Because without it, this story wouldn't be complete. In our marriage, my first rival wasn't another woman. It was his mother. She knew everything about us, our plans, our fights, my opinions. She knew more than she ever should have. Sometimes it felt like she was right there in bed with us, inside his head. She came first, always. She was the first to hear when things went wrong, the first to know about my moods, the first to offer commentary on how a wife should behave to keep her little boy happy. And him? He let her, as if that was normal. Instead of drawing boundaries, he took her side. Instead of protecting us, he nurtured them, their little duet. And I started feeling like the third wheel. Eventually, I saw it clearly. She wasn't just his mother. She was his confidant, his listener, his caretaker, and painfully, a substitute for a partner. No, it wasn't incestuous, but it was too close, too intimate, too possessive, so much so. There was no space left for me. And when he finally found another woman, I wasn't surprised, because his whole life he had been searching for someone to love him like his mother did, without boundaries, without expectations, without truth. And I couldn't pretend anymore that everything was fine. It was never meant to work, and it's not my fault. It was never meant to work, and today, I know that. Not because I didn't try, not because I didn't love, not because I wasn't good enough. It was never meant to work, because I was there alone, because I was the only adult in a marriage that needed two. I was ready to set boundaries, to break the cycle, to build something new. But you can't build anything solid when someone keeps dragging bricks from the ruins. I realized I wasn't the problem. I wasn't difficult, ungrateful, or damaged. I didn't destroy the family. I just no longer fit into a system that was built without me. Because that marriage was never about us. It was about keeping her comfortable, making sure her world stayed intact, so that he never had to choose. Now I don't wait. I don't explain myself. I don't fight for space next to someone who never had the courage to make room for me. I hold no grudge, only peace and truth, which may hurt, but finally, it's mine. Maybe you saw yourself in this story. Maybe someone you loved. The past doesn't vanish. But when we name it, we begin to take our power back. And that is where healing starts. This was The Truth You Don't Want to Hear. Until next time, take care of your truth. Subscribe for more stories that stay with you. New episodes every week.